evaluation for Dr. Battle for the 21-22 school year. And if we can scroll ahead, we'll talk about the process for evaluation this year. So today I'm going to be presenting the results from the director's evaluation. Can I get the next slide? Can we get a chance? Thanks. Okay, so here's the schedule as we have laid out on a number of different occasions around the evaluation for this year. So one of the things we've been doing over the course of this year's evaluation is we are doing quarterly feedback, formative progress reports, doing semi-annual public feedback. So this is our third public feedback. So we had one for quarter one, quarter two, one for quarter three, quarter four, and then this is the final summative evaluation and board feedback. And so we'll go forward. Okay, and so one of the things that we did this year for director evaluation was to move from a concentration and focus on the signature initiatives to a concentration and focus on each of the 4 focused outcomes, and then the initiatives rolling up into those outcomes that they belong to. And so you can see on this slide where it shows us each of the signature initiatives that we've been working on over the course of the past year and going forward, and for each of those which focused outcome they fall under. An important thing to note here, yeah, you want me to hold?
Just technically, Mike, I think you might be muted, or your feed might be muted, so I think we're having audio. I think that fixed it. Thank you.
Want to test? Want to test it?
Well, I see you was unmuted, so.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Testing, testing.
All right, great.
She still can't hear us. Should be. She still can't hear us.
That's a Berthina problem. Okay, so in terms of where we are, if we could just go back quickly, were we off that whole time that I was talking? No. Oh, great. Okay. So signature initiatives rolling up to focused outcomes, and so our evaluation over the course of this year has focused on each one of the focused outcomes. And we can go forward. Okay. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about what the process has looked like for this summative evaluation. Next slide. Okay, so the evaluation procedure involves 2 things for the summative evaluation. So first, we reviewed the director's self-evaluation for each of the 4 focused outcomes over each of the 4 quarters of last year, and then a final summative. Within that, we also looked at summative evidence, and we looked at, for each of the 4 focused outcomes, if you were to reference the current strategic plan that is online, and the strategic plan for the 21-22 school year, there were goals within each of the focused outcomes: literacy, numeracy, social emotional learning, and transitions. There is a chart within the strategic plan that lists those. We then looked at summative evidence relative to each of those focused outcomes as part of the evaluation procedure, plus looking at...
I hate to interrupt you.
Yeah, still not working.
Memory block, no, we're still having audio issues. No, it seems to be global. Just for the record, I think it's working on the big Metro feed, but not on the Teams feed to our remote participants.
just in case folks are watching online and haven't been able to hear what's going on, I've been taking pauses because we are trying to fix a technical issue relative to Teams for some of our board members and Dr. Battle who are not here. Also, you may not be able to hear me, but we'll work it out. Okay, Teams issue. So we're going to pause for just a moment.
Right here. Christian.
Right now?
Testing. Testing. Volume.
Okay, now they can hear us.
Yay! Welcome, y'all.
Testing, you really can hear us? Text me.
Please confirm via text with Frida that in fact you can hear. Apologies to those watching at home. We're just waiting to confirm that we have our other board members and our director online.
The beauty of technology.
Maybe we can just cut all this in the repost.
Okay, all set.
Alrighty. So here we are at the final summative evaluation for our director of schools for the 21-22 school year. Or sorry, 22-23 school year. We are 23-24 now, right? I was doing the numbers wrong. Apologies. Luckily, no one could hear me. The director's evaluation procedure focuses on the director's self-evaluation, which comes with evidence from each of the 4 focused outcomes. So we both review, the board is reviewing both summative evidence and data from student outcomes, benchmarks, TCAP, TVOS attendance, as well as implementation evidence, and all of those things relative to each of the 4 focused outcomes. Also, was previously commenting that if you are interested in finding out more, and when the board reviewed for each of the 4 focused outcomes, one of the things that we used was the strategic plan, which lists, has a chart that includes data and goals and implementation goals as well for each focused outcome. We'll move on to the next slide. So that was the information that the director makes available to the board. And each board member reviewed each portion of that data for each focused outcome. We then provided a summative rating for each focused outcome for the director, met, partially met, or not met. Then we asked the board to include evidence that they saw throughout the self-report, self-evaluation. Also was fine for folks to bring in anything that they had heard at a board meeting, but staying focused on what was within the self-evaluation for each of the focused outcomes, and the information for that particular summative rating. So evidence tied to a rating overall. And then we worked to summarize that data and rating and supportive evidence for this presentation. We then will also review, as part of this meeting, some of the things that were put into the summative review as questions the board have, things that people want to see us continue to consider from a continuous improvement perspective for this year's evaluation cycle. So there were a number of things that folks cited that were things that we want to keep a focus on over the course of the coming year. So even when we said that something was met or partially met, that we also saw additional things that we want to make sure that we're focused on from a strategic priority perspective. Okay, and so now we'll actually look at the results themselves. we can move forward. So for the focused outcome of literacy, the rating received by Dr. Battle, given from the board, is a rating of met. The evidence cited by board members, the first bit of evidence here, this 58.9% of students that met or exceeded growth projections, which outpaced the focused outcome goal of 50%. So for this focused outcome, one of the goals listed in the strategic plan is that 50% of students would be meeting or exceeding their growth projections, which we did see. We saw 58.9% of students doing that. Should I keep moving?
Yeah, they can't see the PowerPoint.
Got it. We also, board members cited, so this is taking a compilation of evidence, so things cited by individual board members, things cited frequently by across board members. So the district was a TVOS level 5 in literacy this year. ELA scores did increase, reaching our highest levels since 2016 when new standards were released. There were encouraging preliminary results from our scholars portfolio. The percentage of students in the below expectations category, and this was cited by a number of board members, is generally decreasing year over year, which is a very strong indication that all students are moving forward alongside that TVOS level 5. And then strong professional learning supports for educators. So these are the things that board members cited in providing the rating to Dr. Battle of MET for the literacy-focused outcome. Go to the next slide if possible. This is the literacy-focused numeracy-focused outcome. We also gave a rating of MET for the numeracy-focused outcome. In this outcome, we also had, within the strategic plan, a goal of 50% of our students meeting or exceeding growth projections. And what we saw was 56.2% of students meet or exceeding growth projections, so that was the first thing cited most frequently by board members. TVOS level 5 in numeracy as well, an increase in student scores on TCAP, promising results from our scholars portfolio, especially for students who were most behind, and some of the implementation around math curriculum, as well as a research partnership with Vanderbilt to monitor the implementation and progress for that curriculum over the course of this coming year. Our next focused outcome is SEL. Next slide, if you can. Great. So for the outcome of social emotional learning, the goal within the strategic plan was around attendance. So reaching an average daily attendance rate of 91.8. And a reduction in the percentage of students that were chronically absent. And we also saw that this year to a rate of 27.5. And so the district did reach its attendance goals overall. 93% of students engaged in the Zone to Grow platform, which is a large growth over last year. Surveys indicating that principals and coaches feel as though the advocacy and peace centers are doing what we have hoped they would do in terms of practice and intervention with students. Some promising data on responsiveness of advocacy centers producing changes in regulation levels for students, so more positive regulation in students that have participated in advocacy centers. A large number of sessions for advocacy centers and peace centers, and increases in our overall usage of community support hubs. And our final focused outcome is transitions. And again, here the board gave a rating for Dr. Battle in this final summative evaluation of MET. And the evidence that was cited by board members for this focused outcome, one of the things that has been focused on is the reimagined transition. And one of the things that we are seeing is an initial increase in retention among zone students in 5th grade, which was one of the goals of that initiative. 97% of students with active transition plans. This is also a goal within the strategic plan that students would have in those transition years would have active transition plans. We also cited here, board members cited evidence around university MNPS, where we've seen students with 160 combined scholarships at Belmont, Lipscomb, and TSU. We also here commented on equity roadmap implementation. Board members were excited to see that we're actually doing some of the good implementation work around equity roadmap, and that we're also continuing to do good work around the leadership framework. And so those last two, equity roadmap and leadership framework, were things that didn't fit neatly among any of the other focused outcomes, but were part of the evidence that was cited here on transitions, things that we're trying to improve in order to improve the number of students who are sort of moving along through the pipeline. Okay, so the final summative ratings then met SEL, literacy, numeracy, and transitions. And again, what board members reviewed here was first the strategic plan, goals listed in the strategic plan, then the evidence from each quarter of self ratings from Dr. Battle, a final summative evaluation, putting that all together, citing evidence. So at this point, I want to just take an opportunity to say thank you to Dr. Battle for always hitting those quarterly self-evaluations in a timely manner with a lot of information, a lot of data that would allow us to also then ask questions. Thank you to board members for providing feedback each quarter. Each board member provided feedback each quarter. And also what we saw was that it wasn't just, hey, this looks great, but there were a lot of questions, a lot of pushing on, I'm wondering about this, I'm wondering about that. One of the things that I saw over the course of the year, having looked at all of the feedback, was that when we as board members put in questions, things that we wanted to see more information from, et cetera, into that quarterly feedback, we then saw a lot of those things come in front of the board as part of director report. And so I would encourage you all, as we go into this next year, to continue to think of this as an opportunity to push for things you feel like we're not getting as much information as we might like about, or things you continue to have questions about, because Dr. Battle is clearly paying good attention to the feedback that we're giving through this process, and then making sure to come back and let us know what is happening, and also helping us to understand what she needs from us going forward, which is part of how we got into talking about this as both an evaluation and a support activity. Okay, and so then before I go into things that we have questions about in terms of support, or things that we're thinking about in terms of ongoing support and continuous improvement for next year, does anyone have questions or discussion on either the ratings themselves or the process? Just fine not to. Seeing none, I'll keep going. Okay, so this is the timeline for this coming year's evaluation, so the 23-24 school year evaluation, as well as some of the things that you all, that we as board members highlighted as things we want to continue to see information on, to make sure that we know how we're going from a continuous improvement perspective. So timeline this year will look very similar to how it did last year. We will again shortly see a quarterly formative progress report from Dr. Battle. We'll get those quarter one, quarter two, will happen January, February timeframe. So we're thinking of these as sort of roughly about a month after the school quarter ends. Then we will do a semi-annual feedback report probably sometime in February or early March. We'll then have quarter three and quarter four. We'll do our second semi-annual at the end of the quarter four feedback, which hopefully will be sometime probably in the July timeframe as we did this year. I think we should expect to see a summative evaluation if data is returned on time from the state, and we can have all of the summative data that we included in the evaluation this year. We would do that hopefully in September next year. If not, we may end up in this October timeframe as well. But one of the things that is sort of important about this is that we are already into the next school year, right? So we're trying. One of the things I feel like has gone well about this process is that we're not waiting to do the summative and have that be it. We have been doing this process all throughout the year, and we will continue to do that going into. We will continue to do that for this school year. Okay, so things that came up as part of the evaluation process this year, things we are interested in continuing to support. So in literacy, we've seen some great growth, but making sure, that we can continue to support the accelerated growth, both continuing growth and accelerated growth for students in literacy. The expansion of proven strategies on the persistent achievement gaps that we know exist, right? So continuing to try and support these two things, whether that means through board decisions or financial support, asking for the things that we feel like we need from council for our money, or advocating for the same things with the state. From the progress monitoring perspective, one of the things that had come up in literacy was we did see where we had more growth in other grades than we did in 5th and 8th grade. And so one of the things that everyone highlighted, that lots of folks highlighted as something to continue to progress monitor, is the strategies that we're using to support those students in 5th and 8th grade. On numeracy, again, looking at strategies looking at how we can continue to support strategies to address achievement gaps, and also in particular on numeracy, given that we are in the middle of our first year of adoption of a new curriculum, continuing to support strategies for professional learning. And things that were highlighted to continue to progress monitor over the course of the year. So again, 5th grade didn't have the same outcomes that we saw in some of the other grades this year. Secondary math, so what kinds of strategies for improvement are we seeing in secondary math? And then we saw more growth in literacy among students in the scholars portfolio. And so what are some potential strategies for improvement in numeracy in this scholars portfolio? On SEL, things that were highlighted by board members that we want to make sure that we are able to help support are individual strategies that are positively impacting attendance, and then scaling attendance strategies as well. In particular, at some of the schools that were targeted over the course of this year, that where we saw positive improvement in attendance, are there things that the board can help support expansion of across the district. And then as we think about continuing to progress monitor student engagement and SEL growth opportunities, improvement strategies again on chronic absence, and what are some additional SEL and mental health intervention targets that we need to support in terms of students district-wide. Finally, on transitions, the work that's being done in University MNPS and in MNPS Reimagined, as we've seen, has felt very positive for board members. How can we continue to support that going forward? And then in terms of progress monitoring, ensuring that the impact of 5th grade transition on student outcomes, given what we had seen around 5th grade, that is a positive one as we get through the course of this year. Thinking about any ongoing implementation of MNPS Reimagined, same with the equity roadmap, and seeing more results of research work from peer, all things that folks highlighted as things they'd like to continue to monitor over the course of the year. And with that, I've talked for half an hour. Other questions and or discussion? Anything in here that anyone had as part of their evaluation that they didn't see highlighted? Any other things folks would like to mention? Yeah, Emily. Ms. Masters.
Yeah, I had just mentioned some concerns around the measures being taken around absenteeism and wanting to sort of have something, I guess, in that category of things for the board to keep an eye on is this, first of all, strategies that are punitive rather than reward focused when it comes to absenteeism efforts. And then secondly, the bulk of the efforts appearing to be around sort of an overall targeting absenteeism with a little bit less emphasis, or at least less explanation of what we're doing specifically around chronic absenteeism. So, the whole you can't go to prom if you miss more than 96% of your days or whatever, that I have concerns that may just incentivize kids who normally come to school coming to school when they're also sick, versus what we're doing to actually get at the sort of chronic absenteeism, which is typically a result of a more systemic issues for a family. The other side is I had some questions just about, in the transition space, the navigator assignments, because I know that the concept of the navigator is a trusted adult that sort of like follows the experience through with a child. So if a child is new in a school, what does that process look like? And what might the process look like if a child or parent wanted a different navigator? So those were sort of my two areas of concern.
Ms. Tyler?
Yes, and I have asked in every form that I've filled out in all of the different quarters to see if we could include teacher retention rates as part of our progress comments. I think that it gives us a larger picture year to year, and I think that that's something that would be really beneficial for us to see, knowing that it's never going to be perfect, because in a district as large as we are, that's not possible. But to be able to compare it to other districts of similar size and similar locations, then I think it's just really important for us to see, are we having a sharp dip in one spot? How do we course correct to try to retain our talented teachers that are doing the work, that are giving our students these kinds of results? So to me, I think that's important. And also, I have also put in there in every single one of my quarterly responses that we still have not had. Let me see if I can find where I put it, sorry. Yeah, that we still have not had a report to the board as required by our new equity policy. That the policy states that one must occur at least annually, and that policy has now been passed exactly a year ago. So we should definitely have one. So just a reminder that that needs to happen as soon as possible.
Right, and so there's some information that we see in some of the feedback around equity, but to make sure that there's a presentation around equity at the board, and then also to consider teacher retention rates as a potential metric within the evaluation for the coming year.
Yeah, and I know that we do teacher panorama surveys, and I've also mentioned that it would be good to get some overview data of that as well. They included some really helpful quotes and information about the surveys that they gave to principals and to some of the advocacy coaches, and I found those to be really helpful. I'd like to see them also on a larger perspective. Just, we could do snippets, or we could do it could be structured in a variety of ways, but I think it's important to also include that kind of feedback from our own teachers that are in the trenches every day.
Yep, and I think we can talk about panorama further as well. I know that was mentioned by a couple of folks.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Dr. Nabah McKinney has a question.
Dr. Nabah McKinney.
Well, she unmuted, and then it froze, and then she's back.
The Wi-Fi's a little funky out there.
Also, Dr. Nabah McKinney, you can send your question to me, and I'm happy to read it out loud as well. Anyone else in the room? Any other questions, discussion?
Nothing in particular, but just I appreciate your work and Dr. McKinney's work in the evaluation, making it continue to build on Dr. Gentry's work from the past, that you have really made it accessible and thoughtful and thorough, and thank you for really seeing through the tedious work. It's one of our major responsibilities and roles, and you've made it very accessible, but also rigorous at the same time. So I just want to thank you guys for the work.
Thanks. Dr. Nabah McKinney, can you hear us? And Oop.
It's Dr. Bob McKinney. It's going to start feeding back if we unmute. So if you can just drop that in the chat, or if you like to text it to me, that would be fine too.
And just to, while we're waiting for that, just to follow up on one other thing. I'm not understanding. The types of things that we bring up here as part of the evaluation are things that we can, then we can take portions of them and put them into other committee meetings, put them into future board meetings, future discussion at retreats, et cetera. And as I said, frequently the things, even if they weren't highlighted here or across the board, I know that those things also end up coming back in director report, and I'm happy to make note of the things that have been noted here and follow up with Dr. Battle and Chair Elrod on those things. Chair Elrod, looks like you have a question.
Can you hear us? Just call me. Now I'll pull your speaker.
All right, so we are.
Oh.
Okay, I appreciate us being flexible and trying to figure it all out together, guys. Thanks. I was going to say I appreciate us taking the notes down that I heard from member Tyler and members, or masters, excuse me, members. Wouldn't that be a name? But I appreciate that we've been doing it quarterly so that it's more consistent, so that we can kind of get ahead of any of the concerns. So it was a priority of mine that we kind of got back on the schedule of doing the summative evaluations and everything else more regularly. So I appreciate the work that's been done by both member O'Hara Block and member Nava McKinney to make sure that we're getting this done. And of course, Dr. Battle and her team. The next step it sounds like that we'll need to take is, of course, going back to our quarterly. Do we have a schedule yet for those? And then, because since I'm on speaker, I'm going to try to ask a couple questions. One, do we know when the next quarterly is going to be? And then two, about our self-evaluation, do we have any plans for that?
It's a great question. So on when the next quarterly will be, given that we just finished up quarter one of school, I think we should expect to see Dr. Battle's self-evaluation here in the next few weeks, and then we will make sure that we as board members are giving feedback to that quickly. We'll then have, so we'll do that. We'll do that again in the January timeframe for quarter two, and then in February we'll do our next evaluation committee meeting. So we'll have 2 rounds of feedback that will occur between now and our next evaluation committee meeting, which will occur in February, where we'll do that. We do need to spend some more time, and perhaps this is a topic for a retreat or for, if we wanted to, another evaluation meeting, but we do need to spend some more time thinking about the self-evaluation from the board perspective. So the thing we wanted to make sure to concentrate on this year for this evaluation process was Dr. Battle's quarterly review, making sure that the quarterly review happened on time, making sure that we are also getting a summative evaluation done. And then also a goal for this year was to be very clear about moving to focused outcomes and having particular outcomes that we were doing ratings for relative to the strategic plan. And I know that we're thinking also about what are some updates we need to do there. So we're very clear about what the goals are for this particular school year that we'll be rating on for the coming year, or for the year we're currently in. Hopefully that answered the questions.
Yes.
Dr. Nabab McKinney.
Dr. Nabab McKinney, you're on.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
There's some feedback. They said try your regular audio now. Is that better?
So she has to mute herself.
You have to mute yourself.
Yeah, she's a. Dr. Nabab McKinney, if you can hang up your phone and just use your regular microphone, that should be great.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yay!
All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone, and I apologize for all the technical difficulties that we're having in this process. I just want to thank Ms. O'Hara-Block for leading the discussion on the director's evaluation, and I want to thank all the board members for the work that they have done to give us thorough feedback and thoughtful feedback on this evaluation model. We initially set up this model so that it could be a continuous cycle of improvement, and we wanted the feedback loop throughout the year for this process to happen. And we have seen very positive results from Dr. Battle in the feedback loop as we continue to ask for questions and continue to as we continue to hold this evaluation process. So I really appreciate the work that Dr. Battle and her team has done, as well as the board has done to help us continue this model. I do want to emphasize that there is plans to hold a separate discussion and retreat related to future 2023-24 evaluation, and what that evaluation will look like, and what models we're looking at from there. So I'm going to ask that if everyone could kind of pause that so that we can hold this discussion in a separate time frame, so that we don't tie these discussions to this current evaluation model, and kind of close out this current evaluation model and this current evaluation cycle. And then as we move into the 2023 evaluation cycle, having a more in-depth conversation about the things that we want to continue to monitor and continue to see. And so I do want to look at a date, whether we do that in a retreat, and it would preferably be a retreat style model, to kind of look at what those benchmarks will be as we move into the 2023-24 school year, as well as also give Dr. Battle time to receive feedback on what we're looking at as well in that strategic model as we move forward. So if we can, and so what I'll do is talk with Dr. Battle and Chair Elrod and Ms. O'Hara-Block to kind of set some times that we want to schedule this retreat for near future, and let you know the dates that those will come, so that we can have a more robust discussion as we move forward. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
So in particular around goals for this year, correct?
Yes. Yeah, in particular about goals for this year and what we're looking to do and what those expectations would be moving forward. And so what we will do is kind of expand upon what we have for things that we want to support and things that we want to progress monitor, be able to fine tune those and be able to move it forward in a separate discussion. But I think that it would be in our best interest to make sure that we separate the two. Close out this evaluation process for the 22-23 school year, and then do a separate meeting for the 23-24 school year, so that we're not combining them together, if that's okay.
And so, Dr. Nabab McKinney, without objection, I think we'll, unless folks have additional comments, questions? We will call this evaluation cycle for the 22-23 school year closed with this final summative evaluation. These slides will be posted as part of the agenda for this meeting, meeting of the evaluation committee, and then we'll do a quick overview of this on report out in our upcoming meeting as part of committee reports, ideally.
Yes.
Yes. And so with that, Dr. Mama McKinney, unless you have an objection, I'm going to gavel us out.
No objection.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you, everyone. Adjourned.